All right, young'un, you settle in now. I got another tale for you, one that's been passed down through the years, whispered by old men who remember things most folks have forgotten. This one's called The Lantern Man. Now, back when my GrandPappy was a boy, there was a legend folks in the valley used to tell. They called him the Lantern Man. Nobody knew where he came from, only that he walked the back roads late at night, carrying an old iron lantern that never seemed to go out, no matter how hard the wind blew. Some folks said he was a lost soul, doomed to wander until he found something he'd lost. Others swore he was a guide, leading the spirits of the dead to where they belonged. But no matter what folks believed, there was one rule everyone in town knew. If you saw the Lantern Man, you never followed him. Not unless you wanted to disappear. A night on the ridge. Now, my GrandPappy, being a young fool back then, didn't put much stock in old stories. He and his best friend, Will Turner, had spent most of their childhood hearing their mamas and granddaddies tell tales about the Lantern Man, but they figured it was just a way to keep kids from wandering off after dark. So one night, when they were both about 16, they got it in their heads to go looking for him. It was the dead of autumn, when the air had that crisp bite and the leaves whispered like secrets underfoot. The moon was high, big and round, spilling pale light over the hills. They set out just after supper, climbing up to the ridge where folks said the Lantern Man had been seen the most. For hours they waited. The wind rustled the trees, owls hooted in the dark, and somewhere far off a coyote yipped. But there was no sign of the Lantern Man. Will chuckled, shaking his head. Told you it was just a story. But just as they turned to leave, the air changed. The wind stopped. The night fell too quiet, like the whole world was holding its breath. And then a light appeared. It wasn't the pale glow of the moon, nor the flicker of a campfire. No, this light was different. Soft, golden, swaying gently in the darkness. A lantern. And behind it, a figure stood, barely more than a shadow against the trees. The Lantern Man. The road that shouldn't be there. Now, a smarter boy would have turned tail and run, but GrandPappy and Will, they were too curious for their own good. The Lantern Man didn't speak, didn't call them forward. He just turned, slow and steady, and started walking. And that's when they saw it, a road. Now, there weren't supposed to be any roads up on that ridge, just trees and brush as far as the eye could see. But there it was, clear as day, a narrow dirt path stretching out into the darkness, lined with old, gnarled trees whose branches twisted like reaching hands. Will swallowed hard. That road wasn't there before. GrandPappy's throat was dry. I know. The Lantern Man kept walking, his light bobbing gently with each step. And for some damn fool reason, they followed. The voices in the dark. At first, it didn't seem so bad. The path was quiet, the lantern's glow steady. The air smelled damp, like earth after a fresh rain, but as they walked, something felt wrong. The trees leaned in closer, their branches tangled overhead, blocking out the moon. The shadows stretched too long, like they were reaching for them, and then came the whispers. Soft at first, just a breath in the wind, but then clearer. Their names? Tom, Will, GrandPappy, froze. Did you hear that? Will nodded, his face pale. I don't think we should be here. But when they turned to go back, the path was gone. a deal in the dark. Panic set in real fast. They spun around, looking for any sign of where they'd come from, but there was nothing, just trees, thick and dark, pressing in from all sides. The only thing left was the lantern man, standing just ahead, waiting. Slowly he turned to face them, and that was when GrandPappy saw his face, or rather, the lack of it. Where the lantern man's features should have been, there was only shadow, a deep, endless blackness that seemed to stretch on forever. The lantern flickered, and for a split second, GrandPappy swore he saw something moving in that darkness. Hands, faces, shapes writhing like trapped souls. A voice, low, hollow, and ancient, spoke. "You shouldn't have followed." Will's breath hitched. "We're sorry. We didn't mean to." The lantern man tilted his head. "You have two choices." GrandPappy swallowed hard. What choices? The shadows around them seemed to tighten. "One of you stays. The other may leave." Silence. The weight of those words settled on them like a stone. Will's eyes were wide with fear. Tom. But GrandPappy wasn't about to make that choice. Instead, he did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed Will by the arm and they ran. The return. Branches tore at their clothes, roots reached for their ankles, but they didn't stop. The whispers grew louder, the shadows stretched longer, but still they ran. And just when it felt like the darkness would swallow them whole, they burst out of the trees. The ridge was there, the town lights flickering in the valley below. The night air was crisp and clean again, the wind rustling the leaves like nothing had ever happened. But when they turned back, the path was gone. No lantern man, no road, just the quiet rustle of the trees. Some roads don't lead home. GrandPappy and Will never spoke of that night again, not to their parents, not to their friends, but neither of them ever went near that ridge after dark. And years later, when Will was an old man himself, he told GrandPappy something that chilled him to the bone. "Tom," he said, voice shaking, "I've been dreaming about that place." GrandPappy frowned. "What do you mean?" Will swallowed. "In my dreams, I see the road again. And Tom, it's waiting. Now, I don't know if the lantern man still walks the back roads, but if he does, you best remember the rule. If you see his lantern in the dark, you turn the other way. And for God's sake, don't follow." That's the end of this tale, young'un. But if you got a taste for more, well, I got plenty more where that came from.